The role of marketer has changed so much as consumer behavior has changed and the way that consumers consume media has changed. So what are the biggest changes that you've seen?
Wow, yeah, there's so many great changes that are happening and so much disruption. And I think some of the bigger ones that we've seen, General Mills being in the food industry and being in the food industry for a long time, 150 years. I think the amount of change that's happened within food trends the last decade have been pretty monumental. So natural organic has obviously started as a niche trend, and now that's a mainstream thing. That's a huge part of our business now, and a decade ago it was a very small part. I think on the other end of the spectrum, you have value brands that, private label was kind of a non-entity in terms of what it stands for, and now private label brands are becoming large. So those are two things that are really, I think, changing the dynamic of how we think about our brands and shoppers. And then technology, of course, is a huge, huge shift. And so just how people are getting their food, through things like Amazon and Walmart, and the push that people are wanting their food, like not a week ahead, but like right when I want it immediately. And so we're having to think about how to set up to take advantage of that new behavior.
And how it seems so much more integrated than it used to be. How do those initiatives come? Do they come from marketing? Do they come from conversations with the consumer and then get prioritized in other parts of the company? Has that relationship changed?
Yeah, so with our company and being in the CPG space for a long time, it's always really been marketing driven, and the consumer's at the heart of that. So we try to stay as far ahead as we can with consumers and understand those trends and bring them back in. And then really relying on marketing to figure out like where are the markets going to be and how they're going to exist. And so marketing kind of plays the hub, and then the other functions really cue off that to be able to support it. So what kind of products we need to be making with R&D, how we need to set up our relationships with customers and sales. And then my group, which leads all of like the brand experience, how do we set up so every interaction a consumer has with us is additive and solving a problem. So it really is kind of pushing us into like, where are we going to go next? Marketers have to lead that because they're really, in our company at least, and I think many others, like seeing where the future is, and then also having to make it happen like in the current present day to drive results.
And how do you look forward, and what are you looking to do? You are the head of marketing for a very established older company.
Yeah.
How do you keep it young and fresh for the next generation?
Well, I think it's things like coming to Cannes and being able to get inspired by other people and the things that other companies are doing. It's easy for us to look in our own industry and say, okay, great, other competitors are doing these things or customers are doing those things. But I like to look at other industries, so technology is really great. So we spend time in the Bay Area quite a bit to understand what are new startups in technology, what are new startups in food, why are they existing, what's happening there. Coming to places like this, which is all about creativity, or going to CES, it's about technology. And so I think getting out to different places and bringing leadership out to experience it is really important. And so even on this trip, we brought a couple pretty senior leaders so they can experience it too, because when they see the changes that are happening, getting them back into the building, it allows us to just like use their momentum to create that kind of change. And then the other thing I would say, the last thing I'd say is we're also trying to really cross-pollinate different levels of people within our own company. So if you've been around a company for 20 years, you're gonna have one perspective, but then having people that are just out of college coming in and talking about how they use media, how they're connected with their networks, what things they're passionate about, it just creates a lot of different ideas about where you should be doing marketing.
And for somebody that's interested in marketing, I presume that the skills that you're looking for and people that you're hiring today is different than the skills that you were looking for when you first started.
Totally.
And so what is the best advice you could give somebody who's looking to get into marketing?
So I had a marketing mentor that told me this quote, and I think it's always stuck with me. He's like, marketing is about creating markets. And so I think that's exactly true. A lot of times it can be seen as, oh, I'm just creating advertising, but marketing is much broader than that. So there's so many places that you can show up as a marketer. I think that there's two things to really focus on. I think one side, you want to understand what drives a business, and that's like kind of the fundamentals of understand how P&L works, understand how forecasting works. Those are basic things. But then I also think you need to think about creativity and imagining what things, products and brands can solve, and really think about the bigger picture kind of put together with the smaller, kind of more everyday, tactical, executional ones, I think makes the best marketers. We call them and people at General Mills that can do the big and the small, can think right brain and left brain. And those people I think are really adept at any situation and presenting a clear picture of the future, but also making it really tangible for their current employees.
And from a tangible perspective, what is the goal that you're working on right now at General Mills?
Yeah, it was funny. I was going to answer that differently because you said tangible, and this feels a little broader. So I think one of the big things I'm working on right now is a 5-year facing plan of how we're going to grow our North American business, which is about 70% of our current makes up 70% of our current sales at General Mills. For me, that is really focused on the trajectory of where the food industry, where our businesses and brands are going to go, and really thinking about our brands and all the great things they do. We have Cheerios and Yoplait and Nature Valley, and individually they're awesome. but we haven't necessarily thought about how to create portfolio solutions at a level that can really make people's lives better and solve bigger problems using the whole portfolio in new ways. And so I'm really focused on that because that's going to probably require different organization structures, different incentives, different culture. And our brands are always going to be like the most important asset, but I think how we serve them up based off technology and consumer changes, it's going to look different. And so I'm really, really focused on that.
That's so interesting because I was just going to ask, does it matter if Cheerios, the branding for that is in line with the other brands' messaging? And how do you do what you just said? How do you make it to serve the consumer to be loyal to all of your brands?
Yeah, and it's hard because—
Two totally different questions.
No, that's totally good. No, it's awesome. I think it's actually a really great question because we, as a company, as General Mills, haven't really we don't market General Mills as a company. It is kind of more of a broad umbrella across many different food brands. And if you think about a couple brands, just for example, like in our portfolio, you have like Pillsbury on one side, which has been around forever, is about kind of Americana, about coming home, and has these great products that are in the refrigerated dough section, which is seen as kind of like old-fashioned a little bit. And that's a brand that's really based on like traditional American values and is really strong in the Midwest and the South. And then we have other brands like Annie's, which is an amazing newer brand that's born out of Berkeley, California, and has, you know, different kind of views on the world. And so as a marketer, you might have to work on both those brands, and they're in different life stages, they have different points of view, their purposes are way different. And so it's really important, I think, at the first and foremost is to know that brand and where it's coming from, and then know the consumer. And we have to be adept at doing different things. I mean, working for one brand in one company, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I could just work for one brand, it'd be so much easier. But then you just get a lot more creativity and excitement by moving people around to different challenges. And so I like it a lot. It keeps us, I think, a lot more agile in terms of being able to respond to different opportunities as they present themselves.
And you have to take risks in marketing, it seems, to really make waves sometimes. Is there a risk that you've taken that totally paid off?
Yeah, well, this one quote that I love that we take in our company is like, if you've got an idea that you think you might get fired for, it's probably like a really good one. And one that comes to mind a couple years ago that was pretty against what I think we'd be comfortable doing at General Mills is, and this was before where we are today, but Colorado had just legalized marijuana. And we thought, you know what, our Totino's pizza roll business is super compatible with that particular product. And so we didn't obviously want to like encourage people to take basic marijuana, but it was such a newsworthy thing in Denver that we did a really smart, specific marketing plan that was very strategically targeted towards people of the appropriate age and disposition. And it was outdoor, and it was social and experiential, very different kind of plan that we had made. And we had this idea that was about live free couch hard, which is what Totino's is about. And the specific idea was called Better When Baked. And it was about baking the pizza rolls so that they're better than in the oven, in the microwave. And we launched that. And that was a big risk for our leaders to take, to do something like that at the time. But they leaned into it because we kind of had done the work ahead of time. And it, you know, the market results for that were we grew that market in Denver about 20% on a shoestring marketing budget. And so it's things like that when you know they're right for the consumer and they're right for the brand, that they're worth the risk because they can kind of pay off with business results. And it's propelled that brand to be a kind of a cool lifestyle brand that it was not before.
And is there a risk you can think of that didn't pay off quite as much that you learned something from?
Yeah, you know, I would say similarly on that business, one of the brands that we had was also Totino's Pizza, and it's been around forever. It's like literally a value pizza for $1, which is a huge, great value. We changed the packaging of that to not actually come in a box, but actually come in more of a sleeve. And we did all this consumer testing. We thought we got it totally right. And when we launched it, sales like fell pretty precipitously for the first couple months. And there were some very obvious like things that we hadn't done that as a human empathy type of thing we should have done, because we were doing more kind of standard research. And it taught me like the research and the data is important, but also the consumer gut. We're selling consumer food products, like trust your gut. And so that for me was like a step back. Like that was not a great plan, but we quickly then adjusted and figured out what do we miss and relaunched it that way. And that business has gotten back actually to growth. But it was a good lesson in humility and like really like we're here for the consumer first. We're gonna change something they value, like we better have a good reason for it.
There's been a big shift to privacy in the tech space, and I don't know how much this affects your business, but I am interested. How do you think that will affect the advertising as we move forward?
I think it's huge. I mean, we work with all the major platforms. And so, you know, we have a really high standard for our brands and our consumers, and making sure that they're always, our advertising shows up in safe environments, that our consumers' information is treated really fairly and in the right kinds of ways. And so I think our kind of expectation of those partners is they make sure that they're doing what they need to do to solve problems and make sure that their consumer data is handled the right way for their platforms. And so we've really expressed that. We meet with them a lot because we are a big spender with them, and I think we're going to be obviously staying close to that to make sure that their expectations keep up with ours. And so I think it's important for us to know too. We rely on working through customers to learn about our consumers, and so it's not necessarily as front and center for us, but because of our partners, it's an issue that we have to stay on top of.
And I'm asking everybody this, is there a campaign that somebody else created that when you saw it, it was so brilliant that you felt like, man, I wish I had created that campaign? It doesn't have to be this year.
Oh, there's lots of stuff that I love. I mean, this year's one that I'll say first, and I'll give you this follow-up answer, is I think every marketer here will probably say the same thing around Nike, and I'm a huge fan of Nike, and so the way that they did the Kaepernick kind of as a spokesperson and really taking chances, just represented I think a pretty crucial moment in marketing for brands taking a stand. Because I think all brands want to take a stand, but when push comes to shove, it's easy to kind of fall back into the middle. And so I admire the courage for that, and I'm glad that the brand and the business results have really paid off. I would say from a broader perspective, a brand that I have a marketer crush on, I've had one for a long time, is Red Bull. I love Red Bull's marketing because it's not about campaigns specifically, but it's about how they take a brand and passion points and create new things around it in a way that's about giving the courage to do whatever you want. And starting as a energy drink and moving into basically being a media creative entertainment entity is a total reframe of the market. And I think brands have the ability to play in a small box or a big one, and they've said, we're gonna play in the biggest box possible. And so as a marketer, that's super cool to see how they've blown that out into a totally new level.
Your portfolio of brands has been around for a long time. Many of them have existed for a very long time. How do you modernize some of those brands? What campaigns are you working on?
It's funny because a lot of folks that now are in positions in companies and around different industries grew up with a lot of the brands in their houses, and so there's a strong affinity that we're really tapping into people who are highly influential in different industries. And so we've been actually starting to work with the entertainment industry a little bit, and in the fall of last year we came out to Hollywood with a couple of our brands and said, do you want to work with Frankenberry or Lucky Charms? And it was amazing to see people come out of the woodwork and say I grew up with those brands, I love them, I would want to do a movie with Count Chocula. And so we have the opportunity to work with partners in new ways, and I think it's probably showed up the best way over the last couple years in the partnership that we've created with Ellen DeGeneres and with Cheerios. And so Cheerios has been this brand that's been around for a long time, built on positivity, and it's oats give you great energy in the morning, so they're good for you, they make you feel good, they make you do good things, and they create this virtual cycle of goodness. And so we've really tapped into that and found partners like Ellen who also believe in kindness and positivity, and then try to combine our ecosystems together to do bigger things. And when we came to her, the first thing she said is, I think we should do 1 million acts of good together. And we're that's exactly what we want to do. And so we took our brand and pulled it in all these different places. And so people would come on her show, or people would show up with our customers, and we would have little micro campaigns that would do acts of good. One of the families that she brought to us was a family that was struggling financially. They had 3 boys, but they would always do good things for other people. So we decided to give them $1 million from Cheerios. 500,000 went to them for themselves, and 500,000 was for them to give to other people. And to capture the things and the moments and the experiences that people have when they are able to give something, that is the true definition of good goes round. And so it's been really cool to see, and partnerships with the right kinds of people and the right kinds of other companies, I think, are how brands are modernizing themselves. And so I only see us doing more of that, and Cheerios has been an amazing example because people see the brand and they're happy, and we want to translate that into something bigger, especially with the context of the current world. And so it's fun to work on a brand that's doing that.
And Cheerios is one of the brands that I associate with diversity and using diversity early, and I don't know if that's true. Again, I'm not a marketing expert, but it certainly for me is one of the brands that has been dealing with that early. Do you think that any of the brands or anyone is doing enough in diversity and how we show people in media?
I think some brands are getting started on it, and I think there's a ton of opportunity. I think part of that is how brands show up in the marketplace with through things like advertising, and casting has been a good starting point over the years for brands to show different people, but it actually starts at the insight on different cultures and what people believe, and if you do that the right way and then that carries through to the end point, then that actually will make something that's really useful for people. What also happens is that we hire more diversity and inclusion, whether it's gender or sex or gender or affinity or demographics of any sort at General Mills. When people see themselves represented in creative work, it makes them feel more proud about the company, and we actually use their insights to build our brands and build our business. And so I think it's a flywheel that is actually really important. not because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's good for business and good for the employees. And so we're doing a lot of that stuff. I know other people are starting to do more of it, but there's a lot of opportunity to do even more in the future.
If and how should brands get involved in political and social conversations?
Yeah, I think the brand, it just goes back to the brand really knowing what it's for and what it's about. And I think sometimes brands can make the mistake of trying to take a stance on a bunch of different things that, at some point you're like, well, do I really care what a toilet paper brand thinks about, this specific issue? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But I think there are certain things that brands have to fundamentally believe in, and they have to take a stand on if it's important for them. We have a brand, Betty Crocker, that's been around for almost 100 years and was built in a totally different time. But it's a brand about being equal and helpful for all families. And so a few years ago, took a stance on gay marriage. And for us, that was a huge deal because that was like a big thing to say, but it was the right thing for that brand at the moment and the right thing for our consumers. And so we leaned in more on an issue than we might have in other places. And so brands can have a huge impact when they do it the right way. And that's the Nike example. Again, I think that's really great to see a big brand do that. But I also think they have to decide where they want to play and where they not to. And also be careful not to play in a place where they get caught up in swirl where they're not actually running their business either.